If you have a smart speaker, you have access to the entire world of NPR and St. Louis Public Radio. All the latest news and all the captivating stories. Activate our voices with yours by telling your smart speaker to play St. Louis Public Radio.
Hello and welcome to the Politically Speaking podcast. I am once again your kind and generous host, Jason Rosenbaum with St. Louis Public Radio. Alongside me in studio in St. Louis is
Joe Mannies, and I'll withhold the kind and generous.
I am ruthless and evil. And our very special guest who's come all the way from the glorious part of the state known as mid-Missouri is
Mike Kehoe,
a state senator from Jefferson City. I was telling the senator before the show, as a former reporter for the Columbia Daily Tribune and other outlets in mid-Missouri, I always love it when mid-Missouri people come, especially because mid-Missouri loves a Mike Kehoe deal.
That's right. Well, I hope they do. And it's a pleasure to be with, some people call you the mighty Jason Rosenbaum, and you know who I'm talking about.
Dave Drebus
Right.
calls me that. So we're going to get into a bunch of different topics today. We're going to tackle transportation policy, unemployment policy, and maybe peer a little bit into the future of Senator Kehoe's political plans. But before we start, we always like to let our listeners know what your district is. So what is your district that you represent in the Missouri Senate?
Well, sure. I represent the 6th senatorial district, and that district is made up of 7 counties. Cole County, which is where Jefferson City is the center. And then I have 3 counties to the west, which is Miller, Montauk, and Morgan. And I have 3 counties to the east, which is Osage, Gasconade, and Marys. All those counties are south of the Missouri River, but they run right up to the Missouri River. So we have a large stretch of river that defines one of the boundaries of the 6th senatorial district.
And I guess that would basically encompass Jefferson City, the state capital, and a bunch of counties that I guess encompass Lake of the Ozarks,
right.
too.
The lake is made up of 3 counties, so it's Miller, Morgan, and Camden. Senator Doc Brown, has Camden as part of his district, but I have 2 of the 3 counties that make up Lake of the Ozarks.
And just for full disclosure for our listeners, I used to vacation occasionally in Tantera Resort. I don't know which county that's in, but it was very nice.
Yeah,
so.
It's in Camden County.
Well, it's not yours, but
yeah, the lake is a great area. It's a large economic engine for the entire state, and so, but it really it shows how diversified our Senate district is.
Correct.
We have the seat of government in one of our counties, in Cole County, and then we have the seat of our recreational industry to the west side of it, and then obviously a large agricultural community, including the wine industry, to the east part in Gasconade County. So we really have a lot of diversity within our district.
Yeah, we used to go to the lake a lot when our kids were growing up.
So you're one of the people in the Missouri Senate who was not elected to anything before you got into Missouri politics. But before we even get to 2010, when you won your first Senate race, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where he went to high school.
That's right.
And kind of what you did before you entered legislative politics.
Well, I was born and raised in North City, St. Louis. I always tease my friend Gina Walsh. She's from Narth County. I'm from North City, St. Louis.
Really?
Yes.
Where at?
Walnut Park.
Okay.
Kind of the Calvary Cemetery area.
Yeah.
Baden.
Yes,
Is what
yes.
most people would
Now, I
know.
got to ask this question because I interviewed Dave Sinclair's son, James Sinclair, and
Yes.
apparently they grew up in North St. Louis City, too. Did you know that family growing up?
I grew up with James.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, my connection to the Sinclair family is James Sinclair. I mean, there's 7 kids, and they used to tease me and say I was the 8th adopted one. But James is my buddy still today. Very good friend.
I just interviewed him about Melville because their main dealership is there and how it's changed. And they mentioned to me that they lived in North St. Louis City,
right.
and Dave Sinclair used to be a police officer.
Dave Sinclair and my father were beat cops together for the St. Louis City Police Department.
Really?
Mm-hmm. They walked the beat, and they were partners. And that's how our family's relationship started way before I was born.
So where did you go to high school?
Chaminade.
Chaminade.
Out on Lindbergh.
So
Yes.
did my son.
Oh, did he? Great. Estovere. So, yes, my mom, what I didn't know is my brother went to a school that closed in the early 70s called McBride on Kings Highway.
Yes.
And that was the Brothers of Mary who taught there. And when it came time for me to go to high school, my mom had followed a relationship with some of the Brothers of Mary who are teaching at Chaminade, and she sent me, most kids in St. Louis get to choose their high school. You have
Yes.
the high school day where you
Yes,
go around all the high
yes.
schools. And I thought I was going to St. Louis U High. They had a rifle range in the basement. And my mom said, "No, you're going out with the Brothers of Mary to Chaminade." And I said, "Yes,
man.
ma'am." So
All this Catholic school inside baseball, as a guy whose name is Rosenbaum, is going way over my head at this point.
Oh yes, Chaminade were some of the best years of my son's life.
But I, as not only a political reporter in Columbia, but just as an everyday Columbian, I think when you ran it in 2010, I think you automatically had huge name recognition because your commercials for your car dealership were on everywhere.
because he hasn't mentioned this yet.
So
what
how
do you
did
do
you-
for a living?
right. Well, through my relationship with the Sinclair family, Mr. Sinclair was very instrumental in helping me acquire the Ford and Lincoln franchise in Jefferson City in 1992. I'd married a girl from Chicago, and we moved to Jefferson City, and we had been the local Ford dealer in Jefferson City for 20 years. And I'm like some other Missourians, I was an aggravated taxpayer. I wasn't a professional politician, and an opportunity came up where term limits presented an open Senate seat for our district, and so my family and I talked about it, and I thought maybe this is a time to make a difference and let somebody in that building that's not a career politician, that understands small business, that's been involved in the charitable community, that was on the Highway Commission, understood some transportation issues, and it seemed like a good fit, and so we gave it a whirl.
Yeah, you were running against, I think, 3 other people.
That's
2
correct.
had been, I think, state representatives, and one of them was an accountant. And, I notice in these Senate races that sometimes the non-elected politician has a bit of an advantage because they don't have a voting record. I guess in your case, you were still kind of a pseudo-public figure because you were part of the Highway Commission.
Right. I had been on the Highway Commission for 5 years before I ran for Senate.
Yeah, I think we need to make that clear. When did you go on the Highway Commission?
2005.
Okay,
Right.
And you ended up winning, spoiler alert, because we're...
for the state Senate, right?
And you did not have an opponent last cycle. This is a super Republican district, so whoever wins that Republican primary wins the whole thing, basically.
I actually did have a Democratic opponent in the last cycle in 2014.
I apologize.
Yeah, in deference to her, nice lady, had some different ideas, but fortunately I was able to win that.
It was not a targeted race because, again, it is a super Republican district. So you have been in the Senate now for, I guess, a little over 4 years. You were the chairman of the Transportation Committee for a while. I guess you're the chairman of a different committee right now. What's kind of your role in the Senate?
Yeah, Senator Dempsey asked me if I would chair the Energy and Commerce Committee, and so I like to be a team player and go where he thinks I'm needed. But you're right, the previous 2 years I had chaired the Transportation Committee. I was fortunate enough the caucus elected me after just 2 years there to be Assistant Majority Floor Leader. So I help Senator Richard, who's the Majority Leader from Joplin, Missouri, kind of run the floor. We call ourselves the traffic cops. That's, try to get the bills out there, give time for senators to debate their bill. And in the Senate, it's a slow and methodical process, as you know. And so that we have a lot of respect for that process. And that is a nonpartisan respect. We want to make sure that we get equal time for folks to really debate the bills and get the issues out there.
Now, is transportation still one of your key concerns?
Oh,
And how would you kind of, just in general, see what Missouri's transportation issues right now?
Yeah, because right now, after the failure of Amendment 7, I got to make sure I got that number right. It's been a while.
Which was the proposed sales tax.
After that failed, everyone was like, well, we're going to come up with an alternative. And it seems to me that any time you put forward any proposal, whether it be sales tax, whether it be tolls, whether it be gas tax, there is just howling from people that they don't want to do any of that. So how do you get some sort of consensus on this issue? Well,
it's a very difficult conversation because Missouri's transportation needs are so diverse. And I'll give you, for instance, in rural Missouri, when you go to a coffee shop, what they say is, why are we passing a sales tax to fix bike trails and take care of mass transit? We don't want our transportation dollars spent on that. And when you come to St. Louis or Kansas City, the conversation in those coffee shops are, why in the world do we want to put a shoulder and a rumble strip on a letter route? What is a letter route?
Yeah.
And so the needs and the priorities, because of the diversity of our state, are so different, it makes the conversation very challenging. And to your point, Jason, every time you come up with an action or a solution, there's a reaction. And it's hard to coalesce behind one solution. We thought the sales tax idea, which I thought was a good idea to give a whirl to, because gas tax revenues are going down. Missouri's gas tax is a flat tax. It's not indexed to the price of gas. Federal government, through the Federal Trust Fund, has really been struggling lately with their ability to help states out with transportation dollars. And fuel efficiency in vehicles really has made a difference in the gas usage in the state going down, and therefore our gas tax has gone down. So the sales tax seemed like something that was not an overburdensome amount, and would make a difference in Missouri to be able to support all types of transportation, because constitutionally the gas tax has to be spent on the road and bridge. In my district, that's fine. That's what they want it to be spent on. In St. Louis, Kansas City, Springfield, even Columbia, they'd like flexibility in their transportation dollars. So the sales tax would allow those communities to prioritize transportation projects that might not have been a road or a bridge, and be able to make some improvements.
But that's kind of in the rear view mirror, so to speak.
So looking forward, what do you think can or
awful.
should
I'm
be
sorry.
done?
Yeah.
But yeah, but like, right, for example, the governor has put out a report, or asked MoDOT to put out a report on tollways. And as a native Chicagoan, the idea of putting tollways may seem, like a good idea here because it's never been done before. But once you put it, gates out at every 3 or 4 miles, especially for people that live out of state, it gets pretty frustrating. Like, what's your take on the tollway for I-70, for example?
I can't let your rearview mirror comment go, because A, I'm a car dealer, and B, I always tell my kids there's a reason that the rearview mirror is 1/10 of the size of the windshield.
Mm-hmm.
We need to look at what we're going to, not what's behind us.
Exactly.
Right.
But to your point, just a couple of quick facts, because I've turned into a transportation geek. Missouri has 34,000 miles of center lane roads and 10,400 bridges. That makes us the 7th largest transportation infrastructure in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at our funding, which is also measured by center lane of miles and square footage of bridge deck, we're 43rd. 43rd and 7th don't mix. The problem is that in 2004, a good thing happened, and Missourians passed Amendment 3.
Yes.
Amendment 3 redirected the dollars. Remember, stop the diversion. That was
Yes.
the campaign. And it allowed, by state statute, the Highway Department and Highway Commission, which I was a part of at the time, by statute said, you shall set up a state road bond fund. You will bond these monies, and you will accelerate projects and make improvements all across the state. In Amendment 3, you saw various things. No matter where you live in the state, you saw I-64 in St. Louis. I'm an old St. Louis, and
Right.
so I say Highway Farty still. You saw the Paseo Bridge in Kansas City. You saw the 802 bridge package all over rural Missouri. You saw Smoother, Safer, Sooner, where roads were resurfaced, rumble stripes were installed, median guard cables were put up, fatalities dropped significantly. A lot of great improvements were made to our roads, but it's created a double-edged sword, because now when you go to Missouri and say we have a transportation problem, they say, the road I just drove on is pretty smooth. It's pretty good shape.
Yeah.
And what we know as the Highway Department and as policymakers at the legislature, it's not going to stay that way. And because the revenue has dropped from all of the funds that I mentioned earlier by $1 billion since 2009, the Highway Commission just does not have the resources to maintain what you're driving on now. We're trying to tell Missourians we know there's something coming, but unfortunately, Missouri's a show-me state. And as long as the roads seem to be smooth and everything seems to be all right, they say, well, I don't know, we need more funding.
So are you interested? I know there's been some proposals about increasing the gas tax.
The aforementioned tolling,
Right.
I-70.
Right.
Well, remember that number I used, which was $1 billion, and remember that we have the Hancock Amendment. So the legislature can't fix $1 billion.
Right.
And I would say that's probably still, as a conservative, I believe that's a good thing. So Missourians have to vote on the fix because the dollars are too big. And so the proposals that may go forward could be, the governor jumped out the other day or a month or so ago and said he thinks maybe we should look at tolling I-70.
Or at least parts of it.
Parts of it.
Yeah.
There's other people have talked about a gas tax increase. Anything over about 2 cents a gallon would have to go before the voters.
Okay.
So if it's a significant amount of gas tax, if you took the Amendment $7 that was proposed as a sales tax and translated that into how many cents on gas, that'd be about 24 cents a gallon. I'm not sure Missourians, you hear a lot of Missourians say, well, I'd support a gas tax. I think they mean 2 to 4 cents, I'm not sure
Right.
they need 24 cents.
Especially since we have some of the lowest gas in the entire country.
So I think I think it's going to be a little bit of a smorgasbord of trying to piece together some pieces of the puzzle that represent the unique diversity that we just talked about in the state. For instance, in Georgia, they broke up their state into 9 different geographical districts and let each of those districts vote on a different solution to fund transportation. And so what happened was in rural Missouri, if we did that, and I don't know if it will work or not, they made sure those projects went to what was important to rural Missouri.
Right.
Like I said, widening a letter route, putting a rumble strip on that. And then in the urban core, they let their tax dollars go towards transportation. Amendment 7 had the list, which was all on there, but Missourians didn't quite grasp that. So maybe if we looked at this regionality-wise and proposed a solution that Missourians could look at, that might be one way to approach it. 36 other states use tolls. Toll roads are a corridor fix. They're not a system fix. So a toll road might take care of an I-70, but it doesn't take care of our state transportation problem.
Right. You can't
That's
put a
what
toll.
every-
Right.
You
and
can't,
that's what everybody's got to
you
remember.
You can't put a toll road on rural Route U
AA,
in Pulaski County or
Right.
whatever. So
Yeah. So at this point, I mean, is there any potential that they might try going before the voters with a sales tax again? Not in the short term, but farther down. I mean, is there a feeling that maybe it just wasn't communicated well?
Well, I'm going to try not to be partisan with my answer. In 11 other states, in the last 5 years, they have moved to a sales tax model to partially fund transportation. In all of those 11 states, their governor was not only for it, he was out in front and campaigning for it. Our governor, before this proposal came up, told me and several of the highway commissioners that he was for this proposal. After it made it through the legislature last June, he came out against the proposal, and then he moved it from the November ballot to the August ballot. I think if we had leadership in that office who was for a solution, whether it was that one or not, and left it on the ballot that everybody was kind of, you know how ballot initiatives work.
Correct.
You try to put it on the ballot where you think you'll have the best success. We might not be having this conversation right now. I'm not sure. It's going to take a while for those questions, whatever the funding option is, to get back out before the voters because, the environment's got to be right to put a question forward like that. And it's a very tough, hey, I hate taxes worse than anybody who will listen to this podcast. But at some point in time, I believe Missourians are sick of politicians who duck solutions because they're a hard conversation. I think we've got to have hard conversations and let people know what their options are.
So let's talk about something that you're doing right now with unemployment. This was actually a bill that you sponsored last year. That could you explain what it is? Because I don't want to explain it incorrectly.
No, it does two things. The unemployment bill, we passed it through the House and Senate last year. The Senate overrode the governor. The governor vetoed it. The Senate overrode that veto. And then the House fell 2 votes short of an override. So it's the exact same bill, and it does two things. So Missouri has a pot of money called the Unemployment Trust Fund that Missouri employers pay into all the time, every day, based on their employees and their payroll. Back in 2009 and 10, Missouri's Unemployment Trust Fund went broke. There wasn't enough money to fund all the employment claims with the downturn in the economy. So what Missouri did, and many states that had to do this, they borrowed money from the federal government to fund unemployment claims. When that money came from the federal government, it comes with penalties, interest, all kinds of things. The federal government does very good when they get repaid for these unemployment loans. And that assessment, what happened was, so Missouri employers in 10, 11, and 12 were still paying their normal unemployment insurance like they always do, but they got additional assessment, as much as going to $84 per employee for every employer to help pay back the federal loan. And it was ridiculous that as employers are just trying to come out of a bad economy that they have this additional cost. Because remember, some people say, oh, you're just whining about employers. Remember, any business incurs a cost. Those costs eventually get passed on to the consumer.
Sure.
So you want to keep Missouri employers competitive. You want to make it a good workplace. And we want the economy to grow. So that wasn't the right message to send to businesses across the state. What our bill does is says that if we ever have to get into a situation where we have to borrow money from the federal government, we should bond that balance and pay it off over time versus borrowing from the federal government, having to pay it back quicker and have to pay all these penalties. It doesn't force bonding. It just asks the bonding board, they call it the Buff Board in the state of Missouri, to look at bonding the balance. But number two, and more importantly, is how do we keep from getting in that hole again? What it does is it ties, several states have done this, it ties the number of weeks an employee can get if they have to be on unemployment to the state's unemployment percentage. So if the unemployment is really bad, 7% or higher, I believe, they get 20 weeks of unemployment just like they do now. However, if unemployment rates are at 5 or 5% or below, they qualify for 13 weeks. And there's a sliding scale in between those two numbers.
Now, I wanted to ask
and
you,
so what that does is tries to help keep a stronger balance in that trust fund. So if we do hit another dip in the economy, we're not out borrowing from the feds again.
Now, I understand the rationale because I think I've talked with other people that say, paying out unemployment for businesses is expensive with the premiums and whatnot. But let's just say I'm a person who has a lower to middle class job and I lose my job under the situation where there's only 13 weeks unemployment, and after the 13 weeks run out, I don't have the wherewithal to pay my bills anymore.
Yeah, but you understand you still qualify for federal unemployment.
That's true.
And that's many times as much as 50 weeks. That number varies pretty much, but generally it's somewhere between 40 and 50 weeks. It's been even higher than that when the recession hit. So when you couple the federal unemployment with the state unemployment, you could be on benefits under this bill even when there's plenty of jobs available for over a year. Mm-hmm. And I think that most reasonable people would say that that's probably enough time to get back in the market and try to find something, especially if our unemployment rate is 5% or lower.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's your prognosis on that, Bill? And are there other?
Well, the House took it up again this year,
Correct.
And they passed it in just a few weeks. It's already come over to the Senate. Senate bill will have a hearing this week, and I believe Senator Richard and Senator Dempsey are both very committed to getting that bill taken up as a priority and get it back to the governor's desk.
Now, separate, another issue, and this is somewhat tied to the transportation, but also other things, is there is, from your vantage point as a car dealer, you kind of understand this. There's also the Tesla legal fight, which actually began with a legislative bill last session, which didn't get through.
And I just wanted to ask you really quickly, do you currently own a car dealership, or did you already sell your car dealership?
No. In November of 2011, we merged with the Mockins Automotive Group out of Columbia. Mm-hmm. So I don't own any piece of that business. However, I do, to make it clear, I still do work for them and help them with some of their expansion strategies and some of the facility building and stuff like that.
Just wanted to get that out of the way. Continue,
Correct.
Joe.
And Tesla, just so our listeners know, is an electric car.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But they use a different way to sell them. They don't have dealerships. So do you want to explain just a little bit about the suit, just in basics?
Well, sure. Well, Tesla is a new startup company based out of California. It's started by Elon Musk, who is a guy who builds rockets and all kinds of different stuff. And Tesla, let me be clear, is a very cool car. I've been in the car. I love it. It's a neat car. It's an electric car, but, all manufacturers have electric cars now. Ford, Chevy, Honda, we all have electric cars on the showroom you can get. But what Tesla did as a model is that they went out and said, we're not going to have dealers. We're just going to sell factory direct. And on the surface, consumers would say, ooh, that's a really good deal. I can buy factory direct and save money. But what that means is you don't have a competitive advantage of two dealers trying to give you the best deal. You're paying full retail for that car when you buy factory direct. And we believe, the Missouri Auto Dealers Association, is that Missouri has a Missouri state franchise statute that was enacted in 1980 that lists very specifically how Missouri dealers should act should they distribute automobiles. We would like Teslas sold in the state of Missouri. We believe they should have to go through a franchise auto dealer. Governor Nixon decided through his Department of Revenue that they would create a unique tier for Tesla and all of a sudden just not pay attention to these 1980 franchise laws that all dealers have to follow and create some kind of new tier that is not in state statute that says, okay, we'll just let Tesla sell direct. And it's not, some people say, well, the car dealers are just whining again. The 1980 statute was put in place as a consumer protection piece. Because I'll guarantee you what legislators thought back then was, we don't want our constituents out buying cars and then they have a problem with it and they go back and the dealership's out of business or the brand has folded and there's nobody there to take care of them, because that's what will happen. And it might not be Tesla. It could be a Chinese company that decides to follow this model and start selling cars direct at a higher volume. Tesla's a very low volume. It's a very expensive car. But you start getting high volumes of cars in here, and your constituents all of a start ending up with these things. They don't have a local dealer to go to that is providing jobs and involved in the community to back up to help them take care of that car after the purchase has been made. So that's what the intent of the law was way before I was in the legislature. I almost said I was in grade school then, probably about high school. And so that's what the franchise dealers are saying. We've had to abide by this franchise law. Let's just make it a level playing field. And I think the consumer would benefit from that as well, because they'd have the local dealer that they're used to seeing at the Heart Ball and their kids on the soccer field and they go to church with to take care of those problems should something arise. We've got to remember there's been many brands in the last 10 years that don't exist anymore. Cool. Saturn doesn't exist anymore.
Trust
remember?
me, I know. I was a big Saturn fan.
Yep, Mercury, which we had. People don't remember Eagle. Remember the old Jeep Eagle? Plymouth.
Yes.
So unfortunately, things happen in the market that causes a manufacturer to not make it. And there's a whole nother conversation on Tesla's financials. But what if that car were manufactured to go out of business? Customers, consumers who would listen to this all over the state, they know that they can still. When Mercury went out of business, I was a Mercury dealer. When people came with a Mercury, I still took care of them because I'm the business guy. I'm the face of the brand. I'm the one that's involved in the community. I just didn't turn my back on them. What will customers do when there is a massive recall on some of these cars? Where will they take these things? They don't have anywhere to go.
Now, the lawsuit, though, is against the State Department of Revenue.
It is.
It's not against Tesla.
The lawsuit is not about Tesla. It is about the Department of Revenue's decision to create kind of this unique tier and issue a franchise license.
So is that affecting like other issues from the standpoint that since Meta has sued the Department of Revenue, and that's part of the Nixon administration, is this affecting peripheral issues since the suit's going on?
No, I don't think there's other issues that it's affected. As you know, that's the breaking news is Tesla has decided to intervene on this lawsuit, and I think the Dealer Association is saying fine because it's not about Tesla. It's about the Department of Revenue's decision to not follow the 1980 statute that's been on the books that every other dealer has had to follow.
So, what do you see as the other major issues if you dealing with transportation and unemployment? Other major issues that you will be involved in this legislative session?
Well, there's a lot of, as I mentioned, Senator Dempsey has asked me to be the chairman of Energy and Commerce. There's a lot of concern from Missourians about the overreach that the EPA seems to be enacting, especially in the agriculture industry, as it has to do with the Clean Water Act. Utility companies, everything from our electric co-ops to our investor-owned utilities, are concerned about the overreach on the Clean Air Act. And to the extent that we can work with DNR and make sure that we use some common sense practices before we get there. I mean, I don't think there's anybody who lives in the state or listening to this podcast that wants dirty water or dirty air, but at some point in time, you have to use a reasonable measurement of how to get there. We have, I filed a bill out there that says that before you enact some of these EPA standards, we have to look at what the economic impact is. I have a little town in Osage County called Chamois, Missouri, and they've had a coal plant there since 1965. That plant was shut down last year. 32 jobs were lost. The school district's major source of funding from property tax revenue is gone. The town literally could dry up just because of the closure of that plant. And not all of the reason, but a large part of the reason they closed were the additional air quality standards that had to be enacted to make that plant run to EPA standards. Now, nobody in the area was getting sick. There weren't dead birds in the fields. There wasn't an effect on the ecological system around that area. It was just continuing to keep up with air quality standards, even though the plant had the best safety record, had no problems out there, was producing and generating electricity for Missourians. I mean, those are the kind of things we got to start saying, whoa, wait a minute, before we put these onerous rules that the administration out of D.C. is promulgating onto Missourians and Missouri businesses, let's make sure it doesn't have a bad effect on the local economy.
Now, a couple of political things before we wrap up here. While I was on vacation in actually chilly Florida, believe it or not, I noticed...
It was a cool wave instead of a heat wave?
It was like 50 and 60 degrees. No swimming for Jason during that time. I noticed there was kind of a minor tiff in one of your committees with recording a video. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, in our first energy committee, we were contacted by somebody who wanted to videotape the recording, and the rules of the Senate, which have been in place long before me, say that if you're a Missouri member of the Missouri Press Corps, you're allowed to do that, and you just call the chairman's office, and we know you're there, and we allow it. And other than that, we do not allow, the Senate does not allow videotaping of committees. However, anybody who can go to it, obviously, it's open to the public, and you can also work through the Senate Communications Office, and they'll give you a copy of a video that you've seen Dean stand there many a times. It's recording these committee hearings, and they can have it. They didn't like that answer.
And it was a group called Progress Missouri who tracks a lot of people. Was the concern that they're a political group and some of the footage may be used in campaigns or something, or is it just more of a protocol thing?
No, it wasn't that. It was more about the rules of the Senate, and I think the Senate is a very traditional place that has rules established for a reason.
Yes.
And I believe that there's a lot to be said for following those rules and keeping those traditions alive. And there's still full access to all that information.
And trust me, if you don't wear a suit jacket in the Senate, you get kicked out. So
Yes,
I know that for a fact. Is there any like desire maybe to live stream a lot of these with Senate communications?
You know, we tried in one of the hearing rooms, as you know, we have a Go Cam down there, and
Yeah.
we're starting to play with some of that technology as the Capitol hopefully gets remodeled at some point in time, and we fix the structure up that's falling apart. I'm hoping that we put better technology into the hearing rooms.
Because that would solve the problem right there.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah,
100%
because there
for
have
it.
been discussions about that, about the fact that, while I can listen, I can't see, but I can listen to the House and Senate floor proceedings, but you really, unless you're there, not on the committee.
But the senator's right. The Capitol is old. They need to kind of repair a lot of things, and there could be some technological problems because the Wi-Fi signal in the Capitol can
It's
be
horrible.
pretty bad.
Yeah, so I think when we do that remodeling, I know the current leadership, both in the House and Senate, was really in favor of trying to incorporate those changes.
Now let's talk about 2016. You're term limited in 2018. I think that you've been kind of linked to a number of races. I mean, you're in the 3rd Congressional District, so you could potentially run for Congress. There's Lieutenant Governor, there's Secretary of State, there's Treasurer. I guess you can't be Attorney General because thankfully you're not an attorney.
Well, I tell Attorney General Koster and then some of our Republican friends who are running Kurt Schaefer that I think there is something on the books that says you don't have to be an attorney to run for Attorney General.
It's just
I
like,
just do that to get their goat.
It's just like the movie. It's just like the movie Air Bud. Air Bud was able to play basketball because even though there's no rule that says you can play dogs can play basketball, there's no rule that says you can't. So what are you thinking for 2016?
Well, you know, I tell people that I'm a kind of a door is always open. I look through all the open doors, and mainly that's in my household. My wife is always trying to kick me out of the house, and that's why the door is open. She wants me out more and out and about. But I never wanted to be a professional politician, but I am the father of 4, and I have a very supportive family. And if there's an opportunity that seems to make sense that I think we can make a change in policy and help Missourians, I'll certainly look at it. I don't have any firm plans on running for any of those offices, but I've been approached by several people. We've looked at several of them, and
Anyone's in particular?
no, I'm not going to run for governor. So
Okay.
I'll just get
Okay.
that done on your
Okay,
podcast
okay.
here right now.
What about Lieutenant Governor?
But I
Kinder
should never
doesn't
say
run.
never. Somebody told me the other day, never say never.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Governor Kinder, I believe, is still going to run, and I think that probably will be a little bit of a full race. I think it's early on in the process in that a lot of the deck chairs are going to get reshuffled.
Yeah, like for example, although I think Congressman Luke DeMeyer said a couple weeks ago he's going to run for re-election. Had he decided to run for governor, that would have been like a 30-way Republican primary that you would have probably been considered one of the top candidates for. So
I'd say if Congressman Luke DeMeyer, is a good friend of mine and does a good job, but if he ever decides to retire or get out of that for whatever reason, there'll probably be a lot of people that look at that seat.
it will be
Because
again,
you know that district is huge. It goes all the way
Yes.
from his town of Miller County and through Cole all the way up to St. Charles County and down into
and
Jefferson
unlike
Yes.
County.
unlike in 2008, which was probably one of the wackiest congressional primaries of ever, it would be a situation where the Republican primary winner becomes the congressman because it became more Republican after redistricting.
Yeah, it did get a little stronger Republican after the redistricting map. So we'll see what the future holds. It really is. I'm literally a poor kid from North City, St. Louis. So every day I walk on that Senate floor and we start with a prayer and a pledge of allegiance, I still get goosebumps, and I mean that. It's an honor to be there.
All right, we'll wrap up this show. Thank you so much for coming here.
Thanks for having me on.
To close this out, you can follow all of our stories at stlpublicradio.org. And just as a quick shout out to our former host, Chris McDaniel, who has left St. Louis Public Radio, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank him for all of his contributions, both to our show and to our station. I know that he's going to do very well in his next projects and his future. And I just wanted to thank him. And I have now taken dictatorial control over his show. Thank you for that. You can follow me on Twitter at @JRosenbaum. You can follow Joe on Twitter
At J Mannies. That's JMANNIES.
And I don't think you have a Twitter account.
I'm gonna get my 17-year-old daughter to set one up for me. I'm on Facebook though.
Okay.
Yes, follow him on Facebook. You're part of the bumper crop of politically speaking people who are only on Facebook, and I think you made the right decision, even though I'm a Twitter obsessive.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm Twitter obsessive too.
Until then, so long.
The Gateway brings you the day's news from the St. Louis region and across Missouri. It also includes stories from the Illinois side of the river and our Metro East reporter, Will Bauer.
In Alton, in Belleville, in East St. Louis, in Edwardsville, in Cahokia Heights, at Scott Air Force Base, I'm Will Bauer. St. Louis Public Radio.
Listen to reports from Will and all of our journalists weekdays on the Gateway, on the STLPR app, and wherever you get podcasts.